Mark didn't listen to the man because he had already made up his mind. I told you I was at work. The case is handed over to experienced Detective Grace Nolan. Grace sees a mistake. Big, dangerous. That's not Elijah. Exactly. Are you going to stand in my way or help me? I'll help. Elijah, you're going to be released. Don't even think about it. Will it be possible to free the innocent detainee? Late evening, rain. Patrolman Mark Rains, exhausted, after a 12-hour shift, receives an urgent call. Armed robbery, suspect in black hoodie, fleeing in direction of Old Town. Mark is nervous. The neighborhood is dark, narrow streets. Poor visibility. It's one of those moments when your heart beats faster than your logic. Elijah Williams, an IT engineer, leaves work after a late shift, wearing a dark hoodie. He walks over to a coffee machine to warm himself on the way home. He holds a bag of groceries. Mark notices his silhouette dark jacket, fast walking, near the call location. Something crackles on the radio announcer. The operator's voice cuts off. The update on the suspect's symptoms doesn't reach Mark. He sees only a picture that matches the anxiety inside him. The policeman gets out of the car. Stop, put your hands up, take off your hood. Elijah looks around in fear. The package falls, the groceries roll across the asphalt. Officer, what? I was just walking home. Not doing anything. These are my groceries. I just got off work. Look, I have a pass, a phone. Please don't shout. I'm not resisting. I don't understand what's going on. Mark didn't listen to the man because he had already made up his mind. Without answering Elijah's words, the officer gestured towards the patrol car. Elijah hesitantly moved forward, still repeating that this was some kind of mistake, but Mark remained silent, focused only on his own guesses and anxiety. He informs his colleagues that he has detained the suspect and is taking him to the police station. While the patrol officer fills out the report, Elijah sits calmly in the police station, but with deep resentment in his eyes, as if waiting to be listened to, but he receives nothing but a cold formality. I told you I was at work. At 8:40 p.m. I left the office. You can check the record. I have a badge, a phone, a GPS. All of this confirms my location. I am not running away or hiding, just give me a chance to prove what is already obvious. I had nothing to do with what happened. Mark is cold, stubborn. He believes that he acted correctly. He does not allow himself to assume that he could have been wrong. Any words from Elijah for him now are just noise that prevents him from maintaining his own confidence. Enough, Mr. Williams, we will add your explanations to the protocol. The investigation will decide what happens next. He speaks as if the decision had already been made long ago, and he was not the one who made it, as if he was simply performing mechanical work where doubts are not foreseen. The case is handed over to experienced Detective Grace Nolan, who has known Mark for a long time. She does not like to jump to conclusions and is good at recognizing when someone is skipping details, guided by fear rather than facts. Grace feels from the first minutes that something is not adding up in Mark's story, and her keen professional instincts give the signal: you need to dig deeper. She watches the footage. Camera No. 4, the real criminal, much taller, stockier, with a tattoo on his neck. Camera No. 7, Elijah on the subway, 10 minutes before the crime, in the opposite part of town. Grace sees a mistake. Big, dangerous. The detective approaches Mark, who is writing a report in his office. She comes not for formality, but because she can't shake the feeling that there is something wrong with the case. Grace has already reviewed the original materials, cross-checked the testimony, checked the time and place, and now she understands that Elijah's arrest may be a mistake. Mark's stubbornness and confidence in his own rightness only increase her anxiety. He is so focused on the procedure that he may not see the obvious. That's why she's here to pick up on details he might have missed and make sure an innocent person doesn't get hurt because of someone else's arrogance or haste. Mark, let's check the times again. Grace's voice is calm, but there is an underlying tension of someone who has already come close to the truth. Look more closely at these frames. I've gone over them 3 times. Mark tenses slightly, his shoulders stiffen, his movements become sharper. This could just be a coincidence. He speaks almost automatically, as if repeating a justification he has considered many times before. Maybe he was just late for the train, or changed his route. This doesn't prove anything. Grace leans in closer, making sure he is actually looking, and not just avoiding her gaze. Mark, the metro shows Elijah on the other side of the city. Her words are precise, almost surgical. 10 minutes before the crime, he physically couldn't have been where you suspected him. This isn't a small detail, it's a time gap that can't be ignored. Mark frowns but still clings to his own version, as if to a lifeline. This isn't direct proof of guilt or innocence. He digs in even more. I saw a man near the scene. He was wearing similar clothes. He matched the description. It made sense. Grace places a second frame in front of him, a clear, well-lit shot from the surveillance cameras. Look at this. Her voice is no longer a request but a strict demand for reality. The criminal is significantly taller and has a tattoo on his arm, a different build. Even his gait is different. This isn't just a resemblance. This is a completely different person. Mark makes a short, irritated movement and almost dismisses the photo. Maybe, he grits out through his teeth, but I follow procedure. I didn't go beyond it. We had an urgent call. The situation required quick decisions. Grace takes a deep breath. She doesn't want to pressure him, but she can't let him hide behind procedure any longer. Yes, you followed procedure, Mark, but this time it's not enough. Her voice is even, yet every word carries weight. You arrested an innocent person, and if we don't correct this, the consequences will be irreversible. Think about what will happen if we don't acknowledge the mistake now. Mark clenches his jaw so tightly, as if trying to hold back words he doesn't want to say. His stubbornness keeps him afloat like armor. He is not ready to remove. He is not yet able to admit the truth, but something inside him is already beginning to crack. His heart races and his thoughts tangle, as if his mind is resisting its own desire to acknowledge the obvious. His hands unconsciously grip the pin on the desk, and his eyes sometimes drift to the frames he's trying to ignore. Every detail that contradicts his belief creates a fissure in his armor, and he can feel it, even though he is not yet ready to let the truth in. Grace leaves the office, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the case materials, records, footage, and reports that call the correctness of his actions into question. Yet Mark's conscience is weaker than his arrogance. He is determined to imprison the suspect because he trusts his own ability to make quick decisions and relies only on his intuition and experience. To him, doubt is a weakness, and admitting a mistake would mean losing control of the situation and undermining himself in front of colleagues and superiors. Moreover, he is convinced that acting decisively, even at the risk of error, is better than risking giving a criminal a chance to evade punishment. His pride and fear intertwine, forming an internal armor that blocks any evidence supporting the suspect's innocence. Elijah looks at Mark, no anger, just a look of hurt in his eyes. You didn't see me as a person, you saw fear, and you filled in the gaps. Mark stares at the protocol and the case footage for a long moment, his fingers gripping the pen tighter than necessary. Inside, something tells him that the situation isn't as clear-cut as he wants to believe. But he quickly silences the doubts. For him, it's more important to remain steadfast, follow the rules, and show that he is in control of the process. He takes a deep breath, straightens his back, and feels a cold determination in his chest. The decision is made, even if his conscience still quietly protests. Come on, Elijah, let's go. His voice is even, almost mechanical, without a hint of emotion. While the investigation is ongoing, you'll spend a few days in the cell. Elijah walks beside him, offering no resistance, but his gaze leaves a wound that cannot be hidden, a mixture of disappointment and helplessness. Mark averts his eyes, unwilling to meet that pain. He knows there is something in the situation that contradicts his decision, but for now, carrying out the order is more important to him. Elijah, you'll be spending a few days in the cell, Mark said in an even, calm voice, without a hint of emotion. While the investigation is ongoing, this is a temporary measure to maintain order and give the investigators the opportunity to verify all the circumstances of the case. I don't understand, Elijah said quietly but without resistance. I understand how you feel, Mark replied. But right now, it's important to follow procedure. This is temporary, and everything will be clarified during the investigation. In the evening, when most of the department had already gone home, and the corridors had grown unnervingly quiet, Grace sat at her desk, rewinding the ATM camera footage for the third time, determined not to miss a single detail. She stared intently at the grainy screen until she finally paused the video on the exact frame that had flashed by too quickly hours earlier, almost slipping through her attention. On the screen was the shadow of a hooded figure, blurred, yet unmistakable, and when the suspect turned slightly toward the lens, the headlights of a passing car caught a thin metal plate on his wrist. The cold glint gave it away. It looked like a medical bracelet, sterile, precise, like a piece of evidence walking straight into your hands. That's what I needed, Grace whispered. Her intuition had finally aligned with the facts. She immediately opened the detained man's file. The man named Williams had no scars, no bracelets, no sign of any medical procedures. And the arrest report confirmed the same. His right arm was completely clean, without the slightest trace of metal or bandages. Grace grabbed her phone sharply and quickly dialed Mark's number. Mark, get to the monitoring room. I need to show you something, she said. Her voice was controlled, but inside her a wave of anxious tension was already building. A brief pause, then a dry, cold voice, with not even a hint of willingness to listen. I already told you, everything's clear with this suspect for now. Don't shove questionable footage at me, he said, as if placing a full stop before the conversation even began. Questionable, Grace let out a low, bitter laugh. This, by the way, is proof you got the wrong man. The media already received the press release about the successful arrest. His words were sharp, almost mechanical. If we stir things up now without solid evidence, it'll turn into a scandal. We can't afford that. So we'll leave an innocent man in a cell. Her voice cracked, exposing what she'd been trying so hard to keep restrained. It's temporary. The investigation is ongoing. We're not breaking any rules, he snapped, and for the first time there was more exhaustion than confidence in his tone. Grace, get back to your work. The next morning at 7 a.m., a shrill alarm echoed through the police station, announcing another crime. Another robbery, same area, same pattern, the duty officer shouted, running in with printouts. Grace shot to her feet. Perfect timing, she whispered, her words thick with bitter irony. since our robber is behind bars. She glanced at Mark. He quickly turned away, but for a moment doubt flickered in his eyes, the very doubt he was so afraid to acknowledge. Grace rushed to the crime scene, feeling that every second now mattered. The ATM was shattered, pieces of plastic and metal scattered around as if something had exploded from inside. On the ground, fresh footprints, still damp from the rainy night. The camera above the entrance had captured the hooded figure again, disappearing around the corner. And again, the glint of the bracelet, but this time it was much clearer, almost deliberate. In the frame, she could see more than just a bracelet. A metal plate with engraved numbers, maybe a medical ID, maybe an identifier from a complex surgery. Something impossible to miss once you knew what you were looking for. That's it, a direct marker. We can identify the robber. And it's not Elijah, Grace said, barely containing the surge of adrenaline threatening to break loose. When she returned to the station, Mark was already waiting for her in the hallway. He stood still, but his eyes held unspoken tension. "You were at the crime scene," he asked, though he already knew the answer. "And you expected me to miss the most important part." She tossed him the tablet, barely restraining herself. "Look." Mark watched the footage, once, twice, a third time. With each viewing, his face grew paler, and the rigid expression he wore began to crumble. Like dried plaster. With each viewing, his face grew paler, and the rigid expression he wore began to crumble like dried plaster. He lowered his gaze. "That's not Elijah," he whispered, and for the first time his voice sounded genuinely human. "Exactly," Grace exhaled. "So now the question is, are you going to stand in my way or help me?" Mark suddenly seemed smaller than usual, as if his authority had wavered in an instant, as though someone had ripped off the armor he'd been hiding behind for years. He handed the tablet back to her. "I'll help." The pause stretched, but it needed to. Because if this real robber struck twice, he might strike a third time. Grace nodded, feeling a clear plan forming inside her. "Then we start now." In the chief's office, there was absolute silence. Mark and Grace sat on opposite sides of the desk, like two people who had finally realized the trap they had walked into. "We can't just go and tell the media we arrested the wrong man," Chief Rhodes said quietly, glancing between Mark and Grace. "It would hit the whole department hard, and the mayoral election is in a week. Do you understand what the journalists would do with that?" Mark swallowed, feeling the words sticking in his throat. "But we also can't keep him in custody," Grace said firmly. "There's evidence that supports Mr. Williams. If we delay now, it becomes a deliberate violation on our part. So we need a solution, something that keeps everyone clean. No scandals," Rhodes replied. After a few seconds of silence, Mark spoke up. "There is an option. Everything was done in a rush. We can frame it as a preliminary detention for verification. We can tell the media that during routine work, the police obtained new data that requires additional checks, and the man is being temporarily released until the tests are completed." Grace looked at him in surprise. "That's actually smart." Rhodes nodded slowly. Not denying responsibility but not admitting failure either. "Yes, that works. We'll draft a new press release." During pre-trial procedures, the police clarified certain data, and the detainee was temporarily released. The investigation continues. Mark added, "And no mention of a mistake, just new circumstances." Rhodes waved his hand. "Fine, I'll sign it, but the two of you will personally handle the release. And Mark," he paused, giving him a stern look, "this time no improvising." While the paperwork was being processed, Grace stepped out of the basement and dialed a familiar journalist, Mia Lloyd. the one who first published the story about the heroic arrest. Mia, listen carefully. We have updated information for you, official information. We're releasing the detainee until the examinations are completed. No, not a mistake. New data that doesn't allow us to hold him any longer. The investigation is still ongoing, and I can give a short on-camera comment, but no speculation. Deal. She hung up and exhaled. In the corridor near the service entrance, Deputy Mayor Harold Stanton caught up with Mark, slick hair, an expensive coat, and the look of a man who was used to getting answers before he even asked questions. "Officer Rains, a moment," he said, his voice quiet but sharp enough to stop anyone in their tracks. Mark tensed. The very fact that Stanton had shown up inside the precinct meant someone up top had already smelled a scandal. "Mr. Stanton, has something happened?" "You could say that." The man stepped closer, his gaze steely. "I've just heard about the updated information, that the detainee is being released." Mark didn't reply, he simply waited. "You understand," Stanton continued, lowering his voice, "that right now we don't need fluctuations in the news. The city is on edge, the mayoral election is a week away. The mayor needs stability, not stories about police incompetence." Mark felt the old familiar weight rising inside him, the fear of making a mistake and being the one to blame again. Stanton leaned in closer. "So do one thing, keep yourself together. No emotional statements, no admissions of error. If journalists try to corner you, you stick to the official line. New circumstances, clarified data, the investigation is ongoing. Understood?" Mark didn't even have time to respond. Stanton was already smoothing his coat. "We all need silence, officer. Silence is order. Order is trust." Then he cast a brief look at Mark, something like a warning flickering in his eyes. "And I hope you've learned your lessons by now." When he left, Mark stood still for a few seconds, feeling his chest tighten. "I'd just shaken off the fear. And now someone from the top is trying to plant the same fear again." Grace approached, not having heard the conversation, but catching something in Mark's expression. "Why are you so pale?" Mark swallowed. "Just another reminder that we're accountable to more than just the law." Grace tilted her head. "You do understand, Mark, not everything that sounds like order is truly order." Those words, simple and quiet, hit with painful accuracy. For the first time in a long while, Mark felt a brief impulse, the desire to do the right thing not because he had to, but because it was true. In the station basement, Elijah sat on the bunk, leaning his back against the cold wall. When he heard footsteps, he lifted his head. The door opened, and Mark and Grace entered together. Grace spoke first. "Elijah, you're going to be released." Elijah squinted slightly, as if not immediately believing it. "So you found proof?" Mark met his gaze, not as an officer, just as a human being. "We found the truth," he said quietly, "and it's on your side." Elijah was silent for a long moment, then he simply nodded. "Elijah, I'm truly sorry for what I did to you. You can go," Mark said sincerely. "Don't even think about it." Suddenly, the deputy mayor appeared in the hallway near the holding cell. Mark was startled to see him. He was certain Stanton had already left. Grace replied anxiously. "Are you serious? We already cleared everything with the chief." "The chief is in charge of the precinct, but the election, that's my responsibility," Stanton answered. "You have no idea what kind of explosion it'll cause if the press finds out we detained the wrong man. Until election day, he's not going anywhere." Mark stepped closer, just half a step, and said, "So you want to keep an innocent man in jail because of politics?" "I want this city to not look like a circus, where where the police can't catch a criminal on the first try. Elijah quietly asked, "So I'm just statistics?" Stanton waved to the guards. "Block the exit. No one takes him out of that cell." The guards moved forward, and then footsteps echoed from the far end of the hallway. It was Chief of Police Rhodes, but someone was with him. A local news reporter holding a camera. Stanton paled. "What is she doing here?" Rhodes looked at the deputy mayor with complete calm. "You're so worried about the city's reputation, so I thought let the press see everything with their own eyes, how transparently we operate, how courageously we correct our mistakes, and that our officers aren't afraid to tell the truth." Stanton jerked forward. "Are you out of your mind? They'll find out we detained an innocent man. Or they'll find out that you wanted to keep an innocent man locked up for the sake of the election. Choose which of those two looks better for your ratings." Stanton opened his mouth, but no words came. Rhodes continued, "I invited the press to officially announce that we are releasing Elijah Williams based on new evidence and launching an active pursuit of the real robber. This isn't a scandal. This is a demonstration of integrity." The reporter had already turned the camera on. Stanton froze. His jaw tightened, but he understood. The only way out now was to look good. He forced himself to smile, straightened slowly, and said, "Well, the city deserves to know we operate transparently. Our priority has always been justice. I fully support the police's decision to release Mr. Wells immediately." Mark and Grace nearly burst out laughing at Stanton's attempt to pose as the hero of the situation. Rhodes gave Mark a short nod. "Let him out." Mark obeyed and asked the innocent man to step out of the holding cell. Elijah walked out confused but free. The camera turned toward him. The reporter asked, "Mr. Williams, what would you like to say now that you've been released?" Elijah took a breath. His voice was quiet but sincere. "I'd say there are people here who did the right thing, even when it wasn't easy." Then he asked, Can I go?" Rhodes nodded and said, "You're free."